Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Articulation webinar. I'm your host, Scott August. I'm glad you could all make it out. I know that it's kind of late in the evening, and for some of you it's dinner time, but I appreciate it. So we're going to talk about basics of articulation and how we do it, some of the ramifications of it, and then we'll look at some examples and songs from my complete NAF guide and also the song that I put in the video, in the handout for Simple Gifts. So first off, if you've read the handout, you know that articulation is the way of producing clear sounds through the flute. It's a way of making the flute speak a little better. And the flute is an extension of our breath, and by that token, it's an extension of our voice. So a lot of the same things that we do for speaking in articulation and speech, we also do in playing the flute itself. And as I explained in the handout, we do this by engaging the tongue against the alveolar ridge, the little ridge in the mouth behind the back teeth, the front teeth, I mean, and without the vocal cords. But your oral cavity also has a big part to play in it, and this is how we shape the mouth and certain vowels that we use to do this. And I know that I talked about in the handout the reference to singing. And I know that may seem strange to people, and I'm not going to make you sing. I should, but I won't. But singing, especially when I'm practicing my recorder out of articulation, a lot more than we do on the Native American flute. If there's something that I'm not really getting, I will sing the passage. And by singing it and involving my tongue and hearing what's going on, I get a much clearer understanding of what I'm trying to do rather than just doing it silently. And again, I'm quoting here a text from 1528. That's a long, long time ago. I mean, Mexico was only conquered in 1521, and obviously 1492, Columbus supposedly discovered America. And you can also see that a lot of these instruments here, crumhorns and cornets and pomales and shawms, they're not regularly played anymore. You may not even know what they are. So to get into this, what we do is we basically say a consonant and a vowel. And the consonant plus the vowel produces a tongue strike that puts air into the flute, and it does it in a way that sort of heightens the excitement of the air in the flute. When you have a Native American flute or any wind instrument, for example, the tube needs to build up a standing wave. And once the standing wave is established, we hear that pitch. And if we don't do something with the tongue, we can actually audibly hear the standing wave start to build into the flute itself. And that produces a pitch in the air, and I'll demonstrate that later. And as you can see on page 2 of the handout, there are several different types of consonant plus vowels that we can use. This is just a few of them. So the first one I have is da. So it's a D sound with an ah vowel. Then we have do, which is a D sound with a oo vowel. And you can already tell just by the way I'm pronouncing them that my throat and the back of my mouth and the whole oral cavity are making different shapes. Ah is a big open oral cavity. Ah. Ooh is more constrained, and the throat is tighter. So this is going to change the way the air comes out of your mouth, and how it exits your mouth affects how the air goes into the flute, and therefore how the flute is going to actually be affected by that. Then we have ta, which is a T consonant plus the ah again. Then T. And again, T, the back of the tongue goes up, E, and there's a tightening in that vowel, and then ka. And again, there's a lot of other ones, but these are some of the more common ones that you'll see. So first off, let's talk about a little bit more detail about how this is working and how it changes the temperature of our breath, the force of our breath, and also how these consonants can do what's called aspirating. Aspirating in speech therapy is a sudden burst of air. So if you put your hand in front of your mouth and you blow on it like you're blowing a candle, but you do a long stream. You don't just do a quick pulse. You go nice, narrow lips. It should feel cold. A very cool sensation against the palm of your hand. Now, if you do the same thing, but you make a larger mouth size like you're fogging up a mirror, it's going to be warm and moist. And what's happening here is that when we do the thinner, smaller aperture of the lips, air is coming out much faster because it's a narrower constraint of air. Just like if you have a large pipe and water's flowing through it and suddenly the pipe enters a funnel and goes down to a very small pipe, it's going to speed up. Or you have a hose, the water's coming through the hose. If you narrow the end of the hose with your thumb, it shoots out faster. The pressure coming from the hose itself, from the faucet handle that you turned on, it's not increasing, but we're narrowing the aperture that's coming out, so it speeds it up. So shapes of the mouth and constraints in the mouth like oohs and teas, and they close the mouth off, they cause the air to go through faster, and this can make the flute break a little bit differently or overblow the octaves, things like that. Now let's talk about aspiration. So if we do the same thing against our palm and we say da, 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 you'll feel a very gentle pulse of air. It's not hard at all. But now if you do a T, ta, 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 you really feel that. And that T sound aspirates. And what happens is if I have a flute, and this is very, very noticeable on the bottom, and I play the bottom note with a da, I can get a nice non-overblown sound. But if I use a ta, it always wants to chirp and pop a little bit. So the softness that we're using in the syllable, the consonant, I'm sorry, plays an effect on how it goes into the flute. So da is the preferred articulation for this instrument. Now that's not true with all wind instruments, but with the Native American flute, because of the front chamber, the air can build up very, very quickly, and the flute can't handle it, and so it pops. Okay. Now what's going on to do this, just so you know, is that in the diagram here, you'll see that there's a little word here called alveolar ridge in the top left portion of the diagram of the side view of the head. And that's the more hard part of the soft palate as it comes down to meet the back of your front teeth. And when you say da or t or anything, you're going to put the tongue against that and then push off from there. So if you're going da or ta or ka, you can feel the tongue hit the alveolar ridge and then push forward. And what consonant you're using affects how the expulsion of the tongue as it pulls away from that. But that's what you're looking for. You're looking to push against there. And you can build up pressure, by the way, inside your mouth and then hit it forward when you let the tongue go. It'll actually seal off the entire mouth from expanding air with your tongue. Now, also in here, and we won't talk about this to a great degree, but you'll see it says velum, elevated and lowered. These are happening unconsciously when we produce different vowel sounds. So ah will raise the velum. Ah, it's almost like there's something stuck in your throat, like an egg. Oh. And e and oo bring it down and bring the tongue up, and so it causes the air to go through the oral cavity faster, and that can cause it to pop the flute a little bit more, to overblow it in a way. Okay, so the size of the oral cavity has an impact too, not just the tongue stroke. So now if we go to the third page, I want to back away from really being tongue and articulation obsessive. And that's why I've called this page air, air, air. Because we are dealing with a wind instrument. So it's the air that's going through it that causes the sound. And so we want to try and keep that air going as much as possible when we're playing, especially if we're playing legato. We want to not let the air stop and cause what I call tooting. So one of the ways to practice this is to do repeated notes. And you'll see on the first line, the first two measures before the double bar line there, I have 3 quarter notes and then a dotted half note. And underneath them I have the syllable da on each one, but I have a dashed slur line. A slur line normally means that those notes are connected without any tongue. The first note gets a tongue and then you just blow from there. But here I'm just using that dashed slur line to let you see visually that I want this to go through. And I don't want the sound to ever drop. So if I do this, I'm going to go. Notice I'm not going. I'm not dropping the air. The second time I did it, I was. I'm keeping the air going and I'm just flicking the tongue underneath the airstream of my mouth to keep the sound going. Let's all try that. I'm playing 5 in the key of A, but whatever you have is fine. And listen for any gaps in the air as you're doing that. Good. Now let's try that in the next 2 bars, which is a 4. And notice you're hearing each note that I'm playing fairly clearly. I am articulating it. It's not where there's no tongue stroke involved at all. But again, I'm not tooting. Okay. Now, why am I having these different notes here? Because the pressure inside the flute will behave differently depending upon the note you're playing. So let's do it on the next line down. We're on note 3. And again, the air is going constantly, as much as possible. And then finally, let's do the 7s. Now, as long as we're at the 7 here, I want to demonstrate something, and that's what happens when we don't articulate with the tongue stroke. If I just blow into my flute, and especially on that note, hear the pitch go up? I do. I hear it very clearly. If you can hear something, that means it's taking more than 30 milliseconds of time. That's about where the human ear can perceive, the brain can perceive a time difference. If you've ever done any recording in computer software, they talk about latency, and latency is about 30 milliseconds, and then you start to hear the delay. So without the tongue, you get this. So that's why we like the tongue. And we want the soft D to get a nice soft sound. Okay, let's move on. So in the 3rd line here, I now have 4 notes. I start on a 4 and I slur up. You can see I have a darkened in arc, which is a slur line. And as you can see underneath in the lyrics, I have da on the 4, and then we just lift our fingers to go to 5. It's slurred. That means that we're not articulating that second note. But then when we repeat the 5 again, the last quarter note in that first bar, in order to play a repeated note, we have to put a da down there. Because if you don't, you won't hear it. And then once again, we slur down to the 4. So we're just playing 2 notes. And I have the dashed line on this first example just to let you know that I don't want the air to drop. So it would be. I'm not going. Now I could if the style of the piece dictated that, and we'll talk about that later. But my point here is that a lot of times when I'm teaching this, I find that people, they get all into the tongue and they don't forget to keep the air going when it's appropriate, okay? Now let's go to the next two measures. We have the same thing, only starting on 3, going up to 4, repeating 4, and then down. So where there's a slur line, obviously I'm just moving my finger. Now let's go to the 4th line. Instead of going up, we're going to go down. 4 to 3, repeat 3, and then back up to 4. And again, I'm not dropping the air between the articulation of that second, in this case a third, the 3. And finally, the last example is 5 to 7, and then 7 to 8. How's that sounding for everybody? Are you hearing the air continue? I find that when we're doing this on repeated notes, it's much easier to hear and thus much easier to control. As when we start to get into notes that are not repeated, that you'll start to have some problems with this develop. Perhaps, not necessarily. It depends upon the person. All right, so now let's go down to the 5th line, and we're going to slur 3 notes and then repeat the last of the 3 notes. So we have 5, 4, 3, and then a repeated 3. Right? So da, da. And if you sing it, you'll hear if you drop your voice. It's an easy way to hear that. But I won't make you do it, although nobody can hear you because you're all muted. All right, let's do the next 2 measures. We're going to go from 4, 3, 1, and then repeat 1. Good, and now 3, 4, 5, 5. Right? And then 4, 5, 7, 7. So again, if you're not used to seeing these arcing lines are, if they're between notes that are not the same, we'll look at this in the next page, they are slur lines, and it means that you're just moving your finger. You blow and articulate on the first note, you give a da on the first note, and then you move your fingers up or down to get to the next notes. If a note does not have a slur line attached to it, it gets a tongue. In this case, it's the repeated notes. And that leads us into the bottom 2 lines, our no tooting zone, where we start with repeated notes and then we're going to go to moving notes. So what I don't want here is, I don't want, that's tooting, right? We want, right? Try that for me. And now let's try the next 2 measures, which is the same thing coming down. All right. And now we're going to go to no repeated notes. We're just going to go up and down a portion of the scale. And we want to just keep the air going through the instrument while we articulate with da. And if that's too fast, you can slow it down. And if you hear the air dropping a little bit, don't worry about it. This is an acquired skill. If you've never done it before, it may be something new to you, especially if you have a tendency, some people do, to do what I call tooting. It might take a while to break that habit. But with work, it can go away. All right, and let's do the last 2 measures where we're going down and then back up. Ooh, I got a repeated note in there. I forgot about that. Okay, good. Let's move on. So here's some examples about things that you might see. I don't expect that you should do this right away immediately, but just some examples. So we're going to start with a 4-note pattern, 5-4-3-1 in number tab. And the next example over to the right is everything slurred. I tongue the first note and then just do fingers down. So that's easy enough to do, right? You do a da and then you blow into the flute. In the next one, we have 2 pairs of 8th notes. So we're going to go da, da. Right? Da, da. So we're slurring every other note. The next one, we're going to tongue the first 2 notes and slur the rest. Again, if you need to do that slower, that's fine. And now we're going to slur the first 3 notes and tongue the last one. You don't necessarily have to repeat, but repeating then reinforces the pattern. And now the second line, the one on the far right, we're going to slur the 2 middle notes. And it's subtle, but it changes the way the notes are perceived. Okay. And then finally, the third line down, no slurs does not mean staccato. And by the way, staccato is Italian for detached, not for short. So a lot of people see staccato dots and they, oh, it's short. No, it's detached. Okay, the opposite of legato, which is connected, right? So if you don't see staccato, or there's nothing in the description of the music or the style that tells you something about it, you don't play, you. Just like the example to its right, where there's a dashed slur line. You carry the vowel through. Da, 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 da. Okay. Now, and again, this takes some getting used to if you've never done it. And if you're not sure, one of the best ways to find out what you're doing is record yourself. We can talk about that later if we have time. Now, on the 4th line down, repeated notes usually do not have a slur. Depends upon the style and the choices of the editor. As you're going to see in the books in my NAF guide, I use slurs over repeated notes a lot, and there's a reason for that. So those 2 notes would get tongued separately. They would have to anyway. And then over to the right of that, even if there is a slur, the repeated note needs to be articulated. Otherwise, you won't hear the repeated note. It'll just be this, who knows, won't be anything. Right? If I don't articulate that, I got, there's nothing there. Okay? And now why would somebody put a slur over that if it has to be repeated? I mean, it's repeated, so we have to re-articulate the note. I do it in the music that I write for my students because sometimes if I leave that out, they drop their air and they toot it. You know, they go. So I put that line over there to just kind of remind them. Now, lines can be a couple different things. They can be slurs or they can be ties. So if we go down to the next line, we see that a line connecting any 2 consecutive notes, same pitch, is a tie. And a tie joins the 2 values into one longer note. So in that line on the left, I have it displayed with the tie. And then over to its right, I have it where the tie of 2 8th notes is now joined to be a full quarter. But they will sound the same. All right, so if I count that in, you can hear it better. 1, 2. bum, 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 right? Now, again, a tie is between two notes of the same pitch. And it has to be the two notes side by side. So, for example, if I put a tie between the two fives on the fourth line on the left-hand side where it says repeated notes usually do not have a slur, that would make that a tie by default because they're the same pitches. They would just become a tie, all right? Now, if we go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, ties and slurs can exist together. I must admit, I was looking at this yesterday and I found an error. Since there's a slur going from the whole phrase, that middle da should be X'd out. That should not be there. Because what I would do is I would lift the finger from the 3 to the 4 and then back down again to the 3. And only one tongue stroke. In fact, that last tongue stroke shouldn't be there either. Ugh, my bad. There should only be one for the whole thing. That same line over to the right. Is that a tie or a slur? So if you think it's a tie, raise your hand. How many think it's a slur? Okay, it is a slur. And why is it a slur? It is the same note, but it's not going from note to note to note to note. It's jumping over notes. So a tie has to be, if I was going to tie these 4 notes together, it would have to be one note to the next note, and then to the next note. You can't have this arcing over things. That becomes a slur. So tie has to be from the same note to the next same note to the next same note to the next note. You can't go over that. Once you go over a note, it's no longer tie. And then the bottom line, ties, question mark, or slurs, or both? It's actually both. You have a slur going over the entire thing, and then each note is paired together to make 2 quarter notes. This should actually be written as 2 quarter notes, not 2 eighth notes tied. But I was just wanting to demonstrate. And then finally, at the very bottom left of this page, will these 2 measures sound the same even though they are notated differently? So if you think they're going to sound the same, raise your hand. You think they're going to sound different? Different is correct. They will sound different. And why is that? Because the slur line between the 2 notes is a slur, not a tie. Those are 2 different notes. So the second measure is missing that note. It misses the 4. So it's actually not the same music. And why did I put this there? Because sometimes you have to kind of like take a close look. Oh, wait a minute, that's that. It's easy to look at something quickly. I do it when I'm sight reading especially. And it's like, whoa, oh, wait a minute. I totally missed that. So things can get a little tricky, all right? So I'm going to put simple gifts aside for now, and I want to go to some songs in the book. How are we doing on time? Pretty well, I guess.